Christianity claims to be a perfect moral system, that makes people holier, has a lot of good moral guidance on what's right and what's wrong. So theoretically, those who rise up through the ranks to positions of leadership should be even more holy, right? Um, I think many Christians want to believe this, and they're very disappointed and embarrassed when they hear about horrible scandals flashing across the news that involve Christian leaders, and oftentimes ones they held in high esteem until the kind of revelations came out. And then many non-Christians, when they see this, especially people who are not fond of Christianity, they'll see it and kind of laugh at these headlines, at the apparent hypocrisy of these religious people, and thinking it kind of shows that the whole religion is kind of false, or just if the people running it are like this, then maybe the whole thing's not worthwhile, and those leaders are just pretty much scam artists, and their flocks are dupes. But so let's take a few examples from this year alone. There are quite a few of very high-profile Christian leaders who've failed spectacularly and publicly, and then we can think about how to make sense of this, because it is, um, often pretty embarrassing for those who call themselves Christians to just see this time and again and try to figure out, like, what do I make of this? So let's start with Roman Catholic ex-Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. Um, I'm making this video in mid-November of 2020, and a recent uh, Vatican report they just released after a couple years of investigating of how did this um, really immoral guy get all the way up to the rank of cardinal, and he was basically the highest ranking Catholic leader in the United States. Um, so, and then he was defrocked by Pope Francis in 2019. Um, but yeah, the report showed kind of the full extent of that. He would, from pretty young age, as a priest, he was trying to seduce young men. When he was higher up in authority, he would um, try to convince seminarians to sleep with him. On frequent occasions, he would um, invite them into his bed. And so there were these rumors from a long time. Uh, and, Pope John Paul II in the report didn't come off looking very well, because he heard some of these rumors, and, you know, I guess when he was in Poland, there was some talk of, the communists would make up rumors and spread them about the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church was kind of their main enemy. So that's one explanation, is he was a little wary, but he didn't totally believe these. And then, um, against the advice of Catholics in the United States, some other archbishops that said, no, these rumors. They're not just rumors. There's a lot of evidence to back up the fact that he's been sleeping with young seminarians and priests. Um, he said, well, I guess McCarrick sent a letter that it said that in the 70 years of my life, I've never had sexual relations with any person, male or female, young or old, cleric or lay, nor have I ever abused another person or treated them with disrespect. And the Pope believed him, and he said, well, obviously these are just rumors, and if any of this comes into more public light, it'll be easy to explain. And that was what he thought, but he was very wrong. And seeing as he's a beloved leader, a lot of people are disappointed, and Pope John Paul II too, for not seeing this pretty obvious wolf in sheep's clothing. But later, when allegation came forward that he had abused an altar boy in the 1970s, then the Vatican scrambled to get more of a thorough look at it, and ended up, evicting him from leadership in any role in the Catholic Church. He's not even a priest, so he's just citizen Ted McCarrick now. So that's one example of a very high-profile scandal of a very immoral person rising to the ranks of leadership. And then you have something like at Liberty University, you had this is the largest has the most full-time students, more than any other Christian college in the whole world. It's pretty, in certain circles, it's pretty well respected, in others maybe not as much. But um, the Falwell family has run it for a long time. Initially, Jerry Falwell Sr., and then um, passed the torch on to his son Jerry Falwell Jr. And but it just came out that Jerry Falwell Jr. had to step down because it came to light that he and his wife had been pursuing some highly unchristian, say, sexual practices. They had a family friend and business partner who they had been involved with in a sexual way for 7 years. The person came forward and they're said it starting at the age of 20, the Falwells would involve them in this these sexual rendezvous, basically, where he was supposed to have sex with Falwell's wife while Falwell himself would watch. So that obviously is, when that came to light, that he was kind of forced out, and he's no longer in charge of Liberty University, which was, pretty much something his family had run for a pretty long time. Another example, also from this year, this one's just this month in November 2020, is Hillsong United, which is a global, very popular mega church. They have a band that's a lot of the main hits for Christian radio have come out of this band, so it's a pretty big deal. And the celebrity pastor, Carl Lentz, for the United States, he was kind of the one who brought it here, and he has Justin Bieber and Tyson Chandler and all these celebrities that look to him as their pastor. He just stepped down, or was forced out of Hillsong because he admitted to having an affair, came to light. And he was having an affair with a Palestinian American woman named Raneen. And she says, she admits it and says, yeah, they would get together twice a week and they would drink way too much tequila and then have sex. And he basically, he found her at a dog park, I guess it wasn't a dog park, it was Central Park, but with her dog in New York City, and convinced her to have a relationship with him. And he admitted that he had a wife and children, but, made it work somehow anyways. And his quote after it all came to light, he stepped down, is that when you lead out of an empty place, you make choices that have real consequences. So kind of admitting that, I guess sounds like he was a little bit of a fraud, that his leadership as a pastor was from an empty place. And then back to the Catholic world, another example, a man who many people considered a saintly figure for decades. His name is Jean Vanier. Some allegations against him came to light that Vanier had started a famous worldwide organization called L'Arche, or L'Arche, I don't know exactly how you pronounce that, to help the disabled. And I've known some people that have participated in that. There's one in my town that, they bring people with disabilities and people who don't have disabilities together. So, it was nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. It was pretty widely respected, and he was seen as, this great mystic, compassionate figure. But then it turns out he was hiding some pretty twisted stuff as well. The report that came out pretty soon after his death said he had manipulative and emotionally abusive sexual relationships with 6 women, from the 1970s all the way into the new millennium, 2005. And these relationships were instigated by Vanier, not by the woman, and in the context of him giving them spiritual guidance. So he would kind of prey on them, almost like they were, they needed help, they were in a tough place, and he'd come alongside them and then manipulate them and sexually and emotionally abuse them. So there's another example of very well-loved person turned out to be immoral and twisted. And the last one, and one that kind of stung for me a little bit as well, is the recently deceased evangelist Ravi Zacharias. And he was also leading a kind of double life, it appears. But when I was coming to faith, becoming a Christian, I would often look at some of his YouTube videos along with William Lane Craig. They were two of the big kind of like um, taking it to big auditoriums and debates and answering direct questions from audience on big things, and always had a good answer, very polished, and maybe the best known evangelist in the world. I mean, there's a couple others that, but he was up there. And turns out he was also living a double life, or but there's an article in Christianity Today, which is not a liberal publication trying to do a hit job on him or something, but they said in Christianity it says 3 women who worked at the businesses located in a strip mall in the Atlanta suburbs. The businesses are massage parlors, like legitimate massage parlors. Told Christianity Today that Ravi Zacharias touched them inappropriately, exposed himself, and masturbated during regular treatments over a period of 5 years. His business partner said he regrets not stopping Zacharias and sent an apology text to one of his victims this month. So I guess this business partner and he got a few massage parlors, and then Zacharias would use those to sort of try to sexually take advantage of women. But and then in a follow-up article it says later it was reported a 4th therapist was fired after complaining that Zacharias asked for more than a massage. So there's other women as well that didn't stay on, and so I guess it's possible to say that they all got together and had some plot, but he's already dead, and they said explicitly that they don't expect any money or apologies. They spoke up because they think there may be other women out there who are hurt by the apologist, Ravi Zacharias, and they want those women to know they're not alone. So the blatant way that he did this led these women to think, well, there's got to be a ton of other women out there, which is crazy to think of. Just all of these people that I just mentioned, how high profile they were, how well respected, how they were able to keep up an appearance of being this Christian leader that everybody should follow and look up to and learn from. So to return to the title of the video, how do we understand this level of evil from Christian leaders? For the people who are supposed to be the ones with answers, the people who have walked this path towards a holier, better way, and they're going to guide us down this path. These were all sexual sins, but those are the ones that usually grab headlines. If you kind of widened it out, there's probably a lot of them who had other kind of sins, stealing or lying, or maybe just being a stuck-up, arrogant, power-hungry jerk with a lot of power and just abused those under them. That's kind of what Mark Driscoll at Acts 29, which is pretty big sort of Calvinist sort of bunch of churches, mega churches. There's one in Raleigh where I live, but he was forced out. He was the person who founded it and was forced out because basically they said that he was domineering and verbally abusive and all of this. So it's not just sexual sins, but those are the ones that I showed were just ones that grabbed headlines. They happened to all be that. So what's the reason that this would happen, that there'd be so many Christian leaders like this? It's basically that human beings are sinful and very capable of all manner of evil. And it seems like that power, money, and fame make that tendency to evil even more tempting, because you have people under you and you can use it. If somebody could be the next Stalin, but they never have any power, you would never probably know it. They might just be a jerk to their neighbors, but once they have that power, then it adds impact to that, and they can really harm a lot of people. So that saying, obviously, by Lord Acton, I think it was, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So that's been clear both in church since the beginning of the church, but also out of it, just in human beings in general. And so I don't think it necessarily has anything, it doesn't say anything about Christianity, that it's not true or anything like that. I think it just, Christianity teaches that the reality of human evil. And so every single one of us are capable of extremely terrible things, and the more we're tempted and placed in those situations where we're not accountable, the more those things will happen. So uh, maybe far from disproving Christianity, that kind of evil that these people did show a main tenet of it. Like if there were a movement that argued that internet addiction was destroying a bunch of people's lives, and then you later found out one of the founders of that movement, one of the top spokespeople, he was actually always online and just clicking all through the night on various links and watching videos. Would that just prove the organization's mission, or just show that even its leaders are susceptible to that kind of failure and the power of the internet to pull people in? So I do think that's a reasonable rebuttal, is that a religion that's about human beings being evil and eating God, a bunch of the people in it being evil, wouldn't disprove it. What it would show is that those people specifically that we're talking about, are either a moral failure or a hypocrite. And the distinction there is basically like a moral failure is somebody who actually believes this stuff, but is just they can't seem to break the power of it. And then the hypocrite would be somebody who doesn't even believe in it at all. They just want to kind of impose a belief system on other people so that they can have power over them, and they're just kind of not bothered by not following those rules. So some of these leaders, I think, are more moral failures, and they truly believe in the faith, and others, I think, don't really believe in the faith at all, and their actions kind of showed that, and they're just sort of wolves in sheep's clothing. So the Hillsong mega church pastor, Carl Lentz, I think, just at my brief looking at these different stories, I think he might have just been a moral failure. The whole time he was talking about, he felt like this was wrong, and he would break up with this woman that he was with, and then call her and get back together, and then break up. And it seemed like he was just a very weak-willed person who still had the tug of the right way inside of him. But I could be wrong about him. He might be just um, one of many affairs. But some of the other ones, like former Cardinal McCarrick, I can't really think that he really believes at a deep level when he was able to year after year just completely um, live a life just directly in opposition. Like, would he not fear that God's judgment on him at some point, that if he's abusing people, if he's living that kind of life, would he not, at least if he felt like he couldn't pull away from that, would he not just step down from his role and confess and spend some time in repentance and just a very simple life, rather than taking on these leadership roles if he knew that he wasn't up for it? Same thing with Falwell, with the 20-year-old boy having sex with his wife and him getting some kind of pleasure out of that for 7 years, or Ravi Zacharias forcing employees of his to give him sexual favors and watch him pleasure himself over many years. To me, that means either you don't believe, or at the very least, that's going to create kind of a fracturing within you if your beliefs are here and your actions are there. And as those continue to move in separate directions, that tension can't coexist forever. And if it's not solved by you repenting and kind of creating integrity within yourself by aligning your actions and beliefs around the faith, then eventually it'll fracture, and your faith will be the part that's sacrificed. And so I think some of these people may have initially believed, and the power corrupted them, and it eventually their actions damaged their faith to the extent that it didn't exist eventually, and they were able to just go many, many years just living, maybe getting up on stage and giving sermons of a certain kind, while also right after their sermon going and seeing a mistress or whatever else. So what can be done? Because there will always be evil, including in the church. And but I mean, we should try to limit as much as we can. So my thought is we need internal and external accountability, uh, especially for leaders, and most especially for ones that have reached some kind of celebrity status, like McCarrick did, and Lentz and Falwell and Vanier and Zacharias. All of them were well-known people around the world in charge of very large organizations that had a lot of souls under their guidance. And so for an external um, accountability, I think that's the kind of thing where somebody needs to be watching any place where there's opportunities for abuse and for conflicts of interest and any kind of thing like that. They should never just be assumed, well, he's a morally mature, spiritually mature person. He can handle that. Assume, set things up so that there's accountability. Anything suspicious at all should be reported. Like those people who were saying, there were people at the seminaries that were like, yeah, we didn't know what to do. The bishop would come in and would ask some of the seminarians to sleep in his bed. Absolutely, that should never. I don't know why that wouldn't immediately just lead to the bishop being not a bishop or even a priest anymore. Um, Same thing with Falwell, same thing with Zacharias. All those guys, they needed somebody around them to put them in line, and if any opportunity for abuse in those areas, and those things should be reported. Any smaller things should be addressed before they become bigger things, and then those kind of moral failures should be confronted and the people fired or let go first time it occurs. You can't, oh, well, I had this massage therapist that I forced to watch me masturbate. Yeah, but that was just one girl. It's like, you should be let go for that. And that should just be the end of it, sadly. The people who are capable of failing, I mean, we all kind of are, but like Jean Vanier, like not all of us, I think, will reach that level. And once somebody does, you can't really trust them again. And then for internal accountability, I think people also need to return to traditional Christian virtues. A lot of these pastors and priests and evangelists, at least the ones who started with good intentions, the ones who started, from the very beginning, not really wanting to live a good, to be authentic Christian leaders, then they just slipped through the cracks, and the external accountability hopefully can weed people like that out. But for those who do arrive with good intentions, internal accountability, stopping yourself, checking yourself on small things before they get to big things. So how many of them would check their thoughts before they turn into habits of the mind and habits of behavior? The small things, like Jesus said in Matthew 5:27-28, you have heard it was said, you should not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in her heart. If you have no internal checks on your thoughts, you are very likely to encourage disordered desires until they materialize into behavior. And that's what the virtues are about, is preventing kind of habits of the mind and to turn into habits of behavior, which will then create your character. And some of these people obviously ignored that for so long, and maybe it got to a breaking point, or maybe they never had much for character in the first place. But just entertaining a lustful thought could lead you to a night of porn watching, and then getting into watching a lot of porn would eventually make you want to act some of that out in real life, and lead to an affair, and then your entire ministry and all your work just collapses into rubble because of that when you get a headline. So that's my take on all these high-profile Christian scandals. I think evil's inevitable in human beings and becomes more likely and more effective the more unchecked power is given to people. But we can fight that with these internal and external checks and accountability, um, and having the institutions trust nobody, even and especially those on top, like these high-profile people we are talking about, and also by the people on top developing their characters with Christian virtues. That's it. Thanks.